Joining me for this next hour are the director and producer of the Path series, who have joined me on the air before to discuss their first DVD that came out last year, and they're back again to talk about their new documentary, the second part in the four-part series called The Path Beyond the Physical. Michael Habernig joins us. He's owner of Habernig Productions and director of The Path. He's a man with a personal vision to impact the world with a documentary on the soul's purpose, path, and presence in our lives. He has been running a video production company for 8 years. He also worked as a director, producer at Time Warner Cable, the second largest cable operator in the United States, for 10 years in the news and advertising department. He has also been a production assistant for ESPN and worked on an independent film called Manny and Low. April Hanna, who is the producer of The Path, has always had an interest in the metaphysical world ever since she was a young girl. She grew up in a home with family members who had natural psychic abilities, and hearing these stories as a child were second nature to her. She began having her own psychic experiences as a child, which later ceased and then reemerged again in her early 20s, which we'll be talking about today too. It was at this point in her life that she began studying therapeutic touch, attending seminars about angels and healing, and their story is very interesting how the two met. We've shared that on the air before. We'll touch on it briefly today, but it spurred the creation of the Path series, and the stories will be fun and interesting to hear. But we're going to be talking about the new film that just came out mostly, and what spurred them into this topic, and we're going to start with April. Hi, April. Mike, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Hillary.
Yeah, thanks for having us back, Hillary.
Yeah, it's great to be here, and this has been a really close project to my heart because, of course, I've been involved with this with you guys as well. But the reason I brought you guys on was not only to help promote your project and to get it out there and make people more aware of it, but also to talk about your own personal interests, because you guys have really great personal stories that have led up to the creation of these. So, April, why don't you start by giving us a little bit of background about how this particular topic came up as your next DVD in the series. Why Beyond the Physical?
Well, when Mike and I were talking about how we wanted to lay this DVD series out, we were really thinking that we needed to, speak to the audience at the starting point of really death and the afterlife, because we really needed to get people to the understanding that consciousness does continue on. And we have so much footage that we realized we couldn't fit all of the footage from all of the experts that we interviewed into just one film. And we went to, each person during each interview, and we had anywhere from 3 to 5 pages of questions that we were asking them, which really, I think what we were trying to do was, get all the answers on many different topics. One being the afterlife, 2 being, on parallel dimensions, out-of-body experience, near-death experiences and things like that. We were asking questions about healing and different healing modalities that maybe some people in our culture really aren't familiar with. And then the last part of our questioning had to do a lot with consciousness. So that's how we decided we were going to separate this DVD series into 4 DVDs. So Mike felt pretty strongly, let's start off with the afterlife, because again, with his personal experiences, that is what brought him to create this documentary. And then we feel like DVD 2, The Path Beyond the Physical, we now have a stepping stone to begin to talk to people and share with them what the experts have said about parallel dimensions, about how consciousness, can move in and out of different reality frames, teaching people about what hemisync music is all about and the Monroe Institute, and how people can actually achieve out-of-body experiences by using some other technology. So that's really where we came to develop Beyond the Physical as the second DVD.
Mm-hmm. And so what has been your own experience? And I know, April, you're only with us until the half hour into the show, so I'm going to start with your experience, and then Michael can share with us his thoughts on these same questions for the second segment of the show. But what has been your own personal experience with this particular topic?
With Beyond the Physical?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think as being a healer, you know that I own my own private practice, Hannah's Healing, and with that I do a lot of energy work on people, and I'm also a Reiki master. So when I really started to delve into my training, it was eye-opening to me that there was so much more than just the physical body. I mean, I was having experiences working on clients and having entities, whether you call them angels or deceased loved ones or spirit guides, coming into sessions and working with their different energies. When I met Mike and he taught me about the Monroe Institute and hemisync music, I've also have used that as well to achieve out-of-body states, and also reading some of William Buhlman's work and how to do that. I feel like what I've learned in interviewing all of these people are different ways to achieve those states. So I've actually been practicing them on my own. And Mike and I, when we were making The Path Beyond the Physical, it was really strange because there would be certain nights where we would almost have similar dreams and achieve out-of-body experiences. And, like, the next day we would call each other up, oh, my God, you're never going to believe, you know, what I dreamt of this night, and be like, oh, my gosh, yeah, I thought I had an out-of-body experience. And, you know, things like that would happen. So the synchronicity as well of how I think we evolved during the first film was pretty interesting.
And you've said that in your bio, it states that you had these psychic experiences as a child, and then you kind of fell out of it, and then it kind of resurfaced in your life. Could you elaborate on that a little bit? Would you like to share with the listeners what that process was like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of strange and kind of hard to go back, but I remember, you know, as a young child, probably the first experiences would be what people would call deja vu. And for me, it was always like I had dreamt of this, and then a few days later, I was doing that same thing. And as a child, I always had very vivid dreams of homes and houses and things of that sort, and going up into adolescence. And there have been times where I would have a dream of being in a house, and then I remember one year I had went out to Arizona to visit some family, and it was my stepmother's sister's home out in Flagstaff, Arizona, and I walked in, and I had already been in that house, and my face went all white. I didn't know what was happening, and I said, oh my gosh, your bathroom's down there, and your kitchen's there, and they're staring at me like, April, how do you know this? You've never been in our house before. So that continues to happen quite a bit. When I started to do some more training with the energy work and Reiki and working on people in my trainings, I would just be getting information about their lives. And, of course, when you're training, you know, you're sharing that with the person and you're getting feedback and validation that, indeed, yes, this information or these scenes that I'm seeing were true. So that was interesting. And, you know, also during that time, I would say in my later 20s is when, I would be thinking that I was dreaming, and people would, be at the end of my bed and, waking up and seeing these people. And I'm like, what is going on? I thought I was hallucinating. And, one of my mentors had told me that, you're starting to go into the spirit world more, and they're kind of feeding off of your energy, and you need to let them know they need to let you sleep at night, Yeah. So I've had some scary experiences in that, when you don't really know what's going on, but you're opening up to a different dimension, that stuff can happen. So, just a lot of little experiences, like that. And most of the stuff happens in my dream state as well.
Now, as a child, did you have the kind of nurturing from your caregivers to understand what was happening, or no?
Oh, definitely. I mean, one of the stories that I remember as a young child was an aunt of mine who is extremely psychic herself. When she was a young girl, she had a dream of my grandmother's best friend dying, and she dreamt of the funeral parlor, the wake and everything, and she came down that next morning and was crying and went to my grandmother and said, Mom, I saw so-and-so, died, and this is what she was wearing. And, my grandmother's like, oh, she's fine. Well, a few days later, this woman had died, and my aunt ended up attending the wake. And sure enough, the woman was dressed in the same exact dress that she was in. I mean, she had every single detail down to a T. And I think that also opened up my grandmother's eyes to say, holy, what just happened? What did my daughter just see? And that's when she was a young girl. And that was always a story that was passed around and shared. And, my aunt ended up fainting and, didn't go to awake again until my great-grandmother had passed away. But my mother also had many experiences in the house that we grew up in my grandmother's home, and she was open to that. So I was never told, oh no, that's just your imagination, or those are just your imaginary friends, and they don't exist. My family was always very nurturing and open to anything that I told them that I saw.
Mm. Yeah. And then how did you fall out of that? You described that you kind of, fell out of that for a little bit. How did that happen?
Well, I think more of that was probably around college, maybe having to do with stress or, just involved with friends and, enjoying college life. I don't know what happened. For some reason, it just kind of stopped. The dreams weren't as vivid. I wasn't having as many psychic experiences. And then I would really say after college, when I started to settle down a little bit more and figure out what I wanted to do in life and, where I was going to work and, then getting into reading more books and studying stuff on the metaphysics, that's when it picked up again. So I think maybe I just needed a break from it for a while. I don't know.
Yeah. And then when it resurfaced in your life, did it happen after you started? I just kind of clarify this for a minute. I know you touched on it briefly, but did it happen after you started to learn Reiki and all of that stuff, or was it happening before, which spurred you into learning how to do those modalities?
Yeah, it definitely happened before, and I think I was searching for answers like, okay, what's going on here? And, I would, have mentors that I would go to for energy work. And, just feeling that and seeing how it changed my whole energy and the way that I would handle difficult situations in my life, I knew just through my own experience that this stuff really works. And then as I was doing that more and healing myself more, then I began having more of those experiences. And that's when I realized, well, I need to learn how to do this because I wanted to share and to be able to help others like I had been helped with experiencing the energy work.
And now in this new film that you talk about, multiple dimensions, remote viewing, and I know that you guys have worked closely with the Monroe Institute. Could you explain to those people who are listening who maybe have no idea what the Monroe Institute is or what its background is or what, nothing to do about it? Talk a little bit briefly about exactly what it is.
Mike, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the Monroe Institute is it started out as a lab, thought up by Bob Monroe, who was a big radio exec back in I believe it was the 50s. And he owned numerous businesses. He had cable companies, and he lived in Virginia. And it started one night when he woke up and he was bouncing around the ceiling in his bedroom. And then after several experiments, and let me also preface that he also had a lot of fear at first too. The idea of being out of your body in the middle of the night was very, I guess that would throw you, I guess, But anyway, he would, over the next few years, he would dabble in experimenting with this, and it came somewhat easy for him to do this out-of-body experience. And so he created this lab with the help of Tom Campbell, Dennis Menerick, who are scientists. And they, from there, they created HemiSync, which is the feeding of one frequency in one ear and then another frequency slightly off, at about 4 hertz or so, I get the terminology right. And what it does is it creates a third frequency in the center of your brain, which syncs your brain, therefore the name HemiSync. And what they realized is that this HemiSync would help people achieve this vibration state, which is the state right before an out-of-body experience. And it brought people a lot closer to having these experiences much quicker. They also had other I can't think of the word. Psychic experiences would be part of this too. So anyway, this lab, now we're in the late 70s, early 80s, and it's turned more into a lab to like a retreat center where visitors can go, spend the weekend there, listening to Hemi-Sync, meditating, and having these out-of-body experiences. And it's not just about the out-of-body experience. It's more about the discovery of certain I'm drawing a blank.
Well, really, I mean, their mission, too, like what they said when we interviewed him was, Mike, that they have people go there and just to accept the simple thing that we are more than our physical body. You know, it's like they don't tell them what they're going to experience when they're there. They just want people to hold that within their mind when they go through their experience at the Monroe Institute, because they have tons of different programs that they offer, like Mike was saying, aside from just out-of-body, but there's other workshops and things that they do there, and they just ask participants to be open-minded that they are more than their physical body. So it really is an institute that's dedicated to consciousness and research on that, and I believe their website is monroeinstitute.org or .com, but it's a really beautiful website, and people, can order Hemi-Sync DVDs off of there. CDs and things like that. So it's a great, great resource for people who are interested in this stuff.
So it's been around for a long time, and when you were describing it, so this is a place that people would look at, like Propala or, the Omega Institute, where people go and have different courses then, or different experiences by different teachers. Is that correct?
Yes, they have a bunch of different facilitators. I mean, in our first DVD, The Path Afterlife, Patty Ray Avalon was one of the facilitators in our film, and there were different courses that she taught there as well. They offer a lot more.
So it's a place, and basically Bob Monroe has been around for a long time, so he was pretty much one of the first innovators into higher consciousness research that brought in a lot of larger people like Tom Campbell, NASA physicist, people along more scientific lines that came in and actually set up studies so that they could prove that these experiences that people were having, with different, psychic things and all of that sort, they brought a real, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they brought a real nice scientific edge to this kind of work, right?
Exactly. They have, on the Monroe Institute, they have actually shared some of the research that was done in the labs. I think, Mike, aren't they called the Explorer files?
Yeah, the Explorer files, or actually I think it's the Explorer tapes. And there's over 30 of them, at least as a few months ago, there was about 30 of them on the site. Each one's about anywhere from 45 minutes to like an hour, 15 minutes. It's really interesting to hear the participants, like Tom Campbell. He's known as Explorer TC on the tapes. And there's a few other scientists as well that are going under, I don't want to say hypnosis, but like this deep meditation, and are walked by Bob Monroe into this other state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think back then, too, there was also a lot of studies going on with hallucinogens and things like that, and plants and different kinds of ways to get out of your body. And I know that all of this was done without drugs, without any stimulants. I believe so, correct?
Right. I mean, they were really trying to perfect the whole binaural beat and the Hemi-Sync vibration that could cause people to go into that altered state of consciousness. And, I believe Tom Campbell said that, they were put into these soundproof, rooms where there wasn't anything that could be distracting them. And then Bob Monroe, with all of his technology and radio background, was able to talk to them in their separate booths while they were in that altered state of consciousness and asking questions and collecting data, having them go into the future and go back into the past and, record what they saw, what the headlines of the newspapers may be, and things of that sort.
Do you believe that we can actually do that? I know that there's studies to back things up, but when somebody listens to a show like this and they hear a lot of quoting from other people's work and stuff, I know my listeners are always interested in what my guests' personal experiences have been. And you've touched on that, April, a little bit. We have you for about 10 more minutes. And I'm curious if you would like to talk about what your personal beliefs are about that and what you have experienced as far as multiple dimensions, other entities, contact with other dimensional realities.
Yeah, I do believe exists, and the reason why I believe exists is because I've experienced it, and I think that's the biggest key for people is, they can hear all of these stories from all of these different people, but it's not until you actually experience it personally will you, quote-unquote, believe it. I think that once you become a little more trained and you're able to work with energy, that it's pretty easy to tap into different dimensions, to be able to, look into other people's energies, see how they're doing. Personal experiences for me happen usually on a weekly basis when I'm working with clients and, being able to see their energies and work with them and see what kind of trials and tribulations they've been through and, sharing those experiences with another person, when they're there in my office, we're able to, give each other feedback. As well as I think a lot of people can experience it where, a family member is on their mind or they just feel like there's something wrong and they call that friend or that family member and indeed, their intuition was correct. I mean, that happens, regularly. I have a lot of friends who will sometimes call me and say, hey, I have a sprained ankle or, something's going on with my daughter, can you take a look at this or what can you see about this person? Can you help them if somebody's sick? And, I'm just able to go there, and just take a look at, the energy body. So for me, I mean, it's pretty easy. It wasn't easy in the beginning, but now that I've actually have lost a lot of my old belief systems, I realize that, again, we are just all energy, and it's pretty easy to go there if you don't think or believe that you can,
Yeah. Do you think that interdimensional contact like that can become physical? There's actually a really interesting conversation and some work that I've been digging into. Philip Imbrogno, who's done a lot of UFO research, and he's actually done quite a bit of connecting the dots with multidimensional realities, interdimensional contact with other entities, having to do with old sacred sites, and a couple other things I've been looking into, especially here in the Catskills. And his newest book that just came out, he'll be on the show in May next month, but his newest book that just came out talked about how interdimensional contact really is what explains most UFO experiences. Now, there's some people who have these experiences where they actually see something, these viewings and all this stuff, which can be described and explained by a variety of different ways. But I really liked how he put that, because if that's the case, and they, if they're conscious entities just like us, and we make contact with them and we work with them in healing settings, how do you feel about the possibility of them then consciously trying to contact us?
Well, I mean, I think I'm just thinking that once you tap in, personally for me, I've had experiences like that. So, once you tap in and you connect with that energy, I think that if you're open in its appropriate setting and they need to come back in to communicate, they will.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, really meeting a new friend.
I've met a lot of people who do holistic healing work, and, it's kind of like a one-way telephone line. They don't know how to work with the incoming. The incoming seems to be a little confusing for people. So not a lot of people really have talked about that, because the incoming can feel very bizarre, very strange, very foreign, unknown. But I guess, as you said before, the more you practice those kind of things, the better the communication process begins, as is with anything. Mike, I'm curious, before we leave April completely, I know she has to get off the air in a couple minutes. Mike, do you have any quick words before we just focus on you for the next half hour?
I would believe that about the UFOs, that it's some sort of interdimensional contact, if that's the way you want to put it. I definitely believe that that's definitely possible. I've seen a number of UFOs over the years, and if you look, well, I'm kind of changing gears now, and I'll probably go
well, we can talk about this in the second half of the show. We can go there in the second half of the show. I mean, we don't have to get into it right now. I just needed to know if you're on the same page here. April, before you leave, I just wanted to give you a chance to, say a last few words on what your hope is with this new project and what you're really, hoping and wishing for this new DVD.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously we're hoping for it to be even bigger and better than the first one. We do have, and I know that you're attending, another screening of The Path Afterlife coming up April 30th in Pittsfield, Massachusetts at the Colonial Theater. So I think, even though we're working on the second film, there's still so many people that haven't been touched with the first film yet. So we are hoping through all the other screenings that we continue to do throughout the year of The Path, we'll be showing the trailer of The Path Beyond the Physical and letting people know that the second film is coming. And I think, eventually if people can just, start spreading it around, word of mouth, letting people borrow their DVD, showing it to them, to friends or family members. I think that's what we're hoping for. We just want to continue to, raise the Earth's vibration and keep doing good work through spirit and just hope that our project reaches the people that it needs to. So, I mean, we're really looking forward to other screenings that we're going to be having throughout the year and really excited to see you again on April 30th. And I know Mike and you guys will, let people know about our website, but we do have a place for them to pre-order The Path Beyond the Physical like they did with The Path Afterlife. And we're hoping to be done with it by the end of the summer, early fall.
So is that the expected time when it's going to actually be available on DVD? Is the end of summer, early fall this year?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we hoped for. We had set some, goals with The Path Afterlife, and we fell behind schedule a little bit, but that's our goal. So maybe a good time might be if we fall behind again. I think it would definitely be out before Christmas. Might be a nice Christmas present for people.
Yeah. So in the meantime, people can continue to watch The Path Afterlife, go to the screenings, and you guys have been very good about getting the screenings together. And the Q&A, I think, is really important, and a lot of people really enjoy that. So there's always a Q&A session with whatever cast members attend after the previews, which is really nice too. And a lot of people really get excited and into that too. So great. We look forward to, hearing more about it. And I'm certainly really honored to have been invited and be part of this project myself. But thanks so much for joining us. And April, where can people get you or find you if they're interested in the other services that you offer?
They can visit my personal website at hannahshealing.com, and my last name is spelled with an H, so HANNAH, healing.com.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, and it's so sad you have to leave us now, but Mike and I'm sure we'll have a great conversation for the rest of the show. Thanks, April. Thanks so much, and best of luck with everything.
Okay, have fun, guys. Bye-bye.
So, Mike, I really want to go into some of the topics that may not necessarily be involved with the current projects that you have now, but I know you have a lot of experience with this kind of paranormal stuff. And I'm curious if growing up you had a good connection to spirit and to, the unseen realms and those sorts of things.
Actually, no.
You didn't? No?
Well, a little bit. Every kid has some sort of psychic connection. I'm sure if I think really hard, I'm sure I had a couple out-of-body experiences that I couldn't explain at the time. But in my adult life now, I'm not able to easily recall those experiences.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if there's some sort of block in my adolescence that came up, but it seemed that a lot of the paranormal and psychic experiences came from people around me. There's actually a couple interesting stories. My father, he was one of 6 kids in their family growing up in the 50s and 60s, and they actually moved around a lot. And one of the houses they lived in, which is actually a couple miles from where I'm living now, was haunted. That was the term they used. And later, he always had stories about things they heard in the attic in the middle of the night. Did that scare you as a child?
Did that scare you, that thought of a haunted house kind of thing?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Little kid, 5, 6 years old. My father's telling me stories about how, he was seeing things in his house growing up. So, I automatically would go to bed thinking, oh my God, these things are going to get me now. And there was a lot of fear involved for me.
Do you think that's what may have shut it down at some point for you?
That's possible. Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that. Yeah, that's definitely a good question. Actually, to kind of bring it back to the house, my uncle, which was obviously my father's brother, later joined the police force in the same town that the house is in. And he always talked about how they would always get calls to that house for disturbances. Not so much the people living there, having an argument or whatever, but the people living there would have these experiences as well with these hauntings. And more recently, I think within the last 10 years or so, one of my childhood friends had an older brother who was good. Let's see, when I was in first grade, he was a senior in high school, so there's a big age difference between him, his age, and our age. So he, when I was getting out of high school, he already had a family and kids, and they moved into this house just recently, and he was also coincidentally on the police force with my uncle, and so he brought my uncle over for typical summer barbecue. And this is the first time my uncle was in the house since he moved out in the late 60s. So he came in. Oh, I should back up. I should also tell you that I'm terrible at telling stories. But basically, growing up, my father and his family had a name for the ghost, and they called it Uncle Fred.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And so when my uncle, 20, 30 years later, goes back to his house, where his friend was living now, who actually I had a connection to his brother. He walked into the house after 30-some years and said, "Oh, hi, Uncle Fred." And his friend's like, "Oh, what are you talking about?" He goes, "Oh, when we lived here, there was a ghost here, and we called it Uncle Fred."
Oh, you're kidding. Wow.
And his friend was like, "Oh, well, we call him Uncle so-and-so," I can't remember the name, like Uncle Larry or somebody. So they had named it too. And they're like, "Oh yeah, we hear noises in the night, disturbances, and it's just, yeah."
So did you guys ever do anything that had some kind of, like clearing involved, or, did it get to that point?
No, they never did. My father's parents were they're very Catholic, so it was more just ignore it and it'll kind of go away kind of thing. And then they eventually moved out and never really came back.
Yeah. Well, most people end up moving out of a house that's haunted, that they don't do any clearing, and, the energy's there. And, it's interesting, too, because I have a friend of mine who does dowsing, and she works with Slim Sperling's tools, and I have just recently found these fabulous things myself. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but I will send you by email the link if you haven't seen them, because I think you'd be quite interested in exploring who he was. His message and work in the world was really fascinating. Anyway, I was just this woman that I know who does this actually says that the noxious energies that cross lines, or, if somebody builds their house on that, it actually acts as a kind of an open doorway for things like this to come in. Just like electromagnetic anomalies cause, disturbances, quote, disturbances, if you will, in the energetic field, where, again, more paranormal activity seems to happen. So there's a way of taking dowsing and stapling dowsing tools into the ground that actually deters these kinds of energy lines from crossing. And I'm just learning about it. It's pretty fascinating. But it sounds to me like that probably would have benefited you guys. But it's interesting that your experience created a lot of fear, and then you had kind of a shutdown because that's really common for people. And, the show's being pre-recorded. I'm sure if we were taking callers, we would have a lot of people call in on that topic alone if we were talking about that for a long period of time, because a lot of parents don't understand how to deal with a child who's very psychically connected and can have a lot of experiences, very lucid dreams, easy out-of-body experiences. And a lot of kids are coming in like that now. You could almost do a whole nother film on this topic alone. In fact, some people have touched base on this topic with the indigo children and kids coming in. And I really believe that it started back. We had these more advanced souls coming in starting back in the 1960s when everybody was really doing a lot of higher consciousness exploration and opening up themselves to higher levels of consciousness and really beginning to experiment with that. And in doing so, they created a lot of pathways for higher energies to come in. And I don't like the word higher because you're really saying higher, lower, some are better, some are not, but more evolved, right, different energies to come in, if you will. So from the 60s on, we have had a lot of children infused, a lot of souls coming in that are older. A lot of the indigenous cultures talk about the real big people, big leaders, big shamans, big chiefs, all the important people coming back now as reincarnated souls, and that's across the board. But I think it's really interesting, getting off the point here, but I think it's really interesting that you experienced that because I don't think you're alone. I think there's a lot of people out there who, I believe everybody is psychic. I believe everybody has a very strong connection to their intuition. It's just become clouded, and they have to learn how to decloud that water, so to speak, so that they can see as a man and hard for himself and express it publicly. I hope I didn't lose you.
Oh, no, my phone, I don't know if it was my end or your end, just blacked out for a minute there.
Oh. Well, I was asking if you think, as a man, do you think it's harder for men to put out there that connection between your intuition and your psychic abilities publicly?
Yeah, I don't. That's a good question. I think, at least for me, I was all more wrapped up into, I just kind of put it aside, and maybe subconsciously there was maybe a fear involved with it. I know, especially trying to experiment with the out-of-body states, there is a fear for me to doing that, like, I'm not going to get back, or something bad's going to happen when I'm gone. So, yeah, I would say it's probably a combination of fear, but also all growing up, I was always trying to get into filmmaking and TV production. So that has also been a big draw. So it's kind of like half and half with a little bit of fear.
I think you do both. I think you do both, Mike. I mean, I know you personally, so it's kind of like I know that you have a really special gift of combining these things and putting it out. And the films and the documentaries that you do are a very powerful creative expression of your intuitive ability, because your intuitive ability is what guides you around to picking up the topic and subject matter and the people that you put in. Yeah? What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I also... I should also point out that once April and I started doing the first film, The Path, and after we talked to you and Tom Campbell and Brenda Jenks and all the other people that were in the film, and I started reading some of the books, like My Big Toe and Adventures Beyond the Body, I started having these psychic experiences, and there was a lot of situations where it would have been almost eerie. What's the word? Eerie? No. It was a lot of not coincidental. It was like too much coincidence to be coincidence, if that makes sense.
Right. Your story is interesting, and we don't have time to go into it now, but we can touch base on it a little bit. But for the full story, it's on your website, which is thepathseries.com, for anybody interested in learning more about Mike and April's story, each individual film, seeing the trailers. You can go to thepathseries.com, and you can find all the information and how to order and pre-order and all that stuff too. But their story is on there in the About section. And it's quite interesting because they had some, and I'm paraphrasing here, Michael, so jump in anytime you want, but you had an 11/11 experience where the two of you were seeing the number 11, having a lot of 11/11 experiences. The dates were adding up to 11. You had an extraordinary synchronistic experience before the two of you even began to work, began to really solidify the project, which is a fascinating story. And I think there was a lot of interest in that phenomena. A lot of stuff going up on the internet. A couple people wrote books about the phenomena, and it's a paranormal kind of thing where it asks people to pay attention. And of course, the numerology behind it is important too. I'm not a numerologist, so I won't go into that. But I also think it's just a validation of doing the right thing. Now, I, too, was also having a lot of those experiences before you and April approached me about being involved in the film. And it seems to come in spurts where, it'll happen really obviously, and then it kind of goes away. And I've really learned to work with that 11/11 energy by paying very close attention to what comes into my experience while it's coming. I'll wake up at 11:11 or, at night, or I'll look at the clock at 11:11 in the morning, or, my receipts are adding up to 11:11 on my phone, all those kind of things. And I know that you guys had that same experience. Are you still experiencing that, or has it come and gone in flux like it has for me?
It's been, I'll say overall it's been steady. We still, at least I still get it a lot, and I just got it today. And it's not just 11/11, it's 12/12, 1/11, 2/22. In the very beginning it was like 1, 2, 3, 4. I would see a lot on the microwave, and in the camera when I was shooting, I would just happen to look down, and you get and you got to be at that right second where you see 11/11. And I think, and when we took a break from the first film, the second film, at least in production, it did slow down a little bit, but there'd be a week go by when I would only get it like 2 or 3 times. Mm-hmm. And then, a couple weeks later, it would come back, and it would be like every hour I was getting it. And it almost got so frustrating. Like, what are you trying to tell me? And it was starting to really
it's a really crazy thing. I mean, I just got back from 2 weeks in Hawaii. We did an elders gathering down there, and I was working with Earth Wisdom and the Sisters of Hanoa, and we were doing an elders gathering. And the entire time, beginning from the time I got to the airport, all the way through LA, out to Hawaii, 11 was showing up all over the place. And of course, it was a very powerful trip. We had an amazing time, and there was a lot of high energy. And when we come back, when I came back, still on the way back home, but now that I'm home, it's kind of like, okay. I mean, I just got an email at 11:11 just as we were on the air, and I was looking at my phone. I said, isn't that interesting? And the message in that email was very pertinent to what's going on now. So it's interesting how it works. But it's not just clocks. I think the numerology, the numbers that come in, I think it's really important to find a good numerologist, somebody who really knows and understands the metaphysical meaning behind numbers, so that you can start. It's kind of like, aligning yourself with the moon cycles, full moon and the new moon, and understanding the power of that in your life and what that means. It's not just woo-woo astrology, future forecasting kind of things. There's actual energies that you can connect to when you align yourself with a full and new moon, but it's also the same way with numbers. Have you had that experience that numbers are, play a pretty important part in the higher meaning of things?
Yeah, I see it more now. When we first started, obviously, I didn't really know much about numerology, and it was kind of interesting. I I hated math in school, so I tried to stay away from numbers as much as possible growing up. But yeah, no, I definitely think that each number is very powerful in a different way, and I think it and obviously shows.
Excuse me.
Because I did my birthday and it was 11, or I think there's a minor. I don't like you. I don't know numerology, but there's a master number which would be 11, and then your minor number would be 2 if you add up the 1.
Yeah.
And when you're doing your best work and your life's work, you're at 11, and when you're not. When you're kind of taking a break, you're at a 2 or something. At least that's how it was put to me. And
so you kind of gauge down when you can kind of go by what the numbers are appearing in your life. If you're in the low numbers, you're not doing so well, kind of thing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So if you have the high numbers showing up, everybody, you're doing great. If you have the low numbers up, you gotta step it up a notch. That's basically what it is. I don't know if that's true, so everybody listening, don't quote me on that. Don't go out saying that I said, because it happens all the time. But I'm just kind of joking. I don't know if that's the case. But Mike, what do you have in mind for your future as far as becoming like you have such a power in your hands when you put together film, because it reaches other people's consciousness. Anytime you have a book or a piece of work that goes out publicly and kind of ripples across the world in its own way, you change and open up consciousness, you change people's psyche. So it's important that the intention behind your work, which is very, very high, your integrity and intention is very powerful and positive and very high. What is the message that I usually save this for the end of the show, but I think we can get into talking about this for the last couple of minutes. What is your intention with this work, and where do you see yourself going after the 4-part of the DVD series have been finished and completed? Do you see yourself going on as a filmmaker who has a higher purpose with your outlet?
Yeah, April and I had briefly talked about what we're going to do after the 4 DVDs, and there's numerous projects we can do. One idea is more of a series based, whether it's a weekly or monthly episode type project, rather than these long films that come out every other year or every year. And so that's a possibility. We might do a more of a narrative film, or it's more like more entertaining, I would say. But it would deal with this kind of work, with spiritual type work. Of course, for me, it would have to have a lot of science in it too.
Why are you more scientific?
Yeah, I need that evidence. I do get some of the experience. I don't have the same kind of experience that April has had, but I do. I do like having the science there to back it up, saying, okay, I'm not. I'm not,
I think you make a good point. I think you make a good point, because I think a lot of people enjoy that aspect of it. It's kind of like the right and left brain. I know when I do events with Tom, that's exactly what we are. He's one side of the brain and I'm the other. And even though we're saying kind of the same thing, it's like a totally different language. It's really kind of funny, actually. But I think a lot of people really like to see the science behind it, because let's face it, whether we like it or not, we've been raised in a prove it kind of society that, unless something can be proven, it really doesn't hold much weight in this world. I think that's changing. I think that's what's going to happen over the next, in the future, is we're going to not need so much proof as we go. But I think that for now, that's really an important thing. And I commend you in saying that and giving credit to that. And you certainly bring that through in your films, because it is an important part. People really want to know what your credentials are, where you come from, what your background is, who you are, and why you're doing the work that you're doing. There's a lot of people out there who really won't even look at something unless they know there's a lot of, data to back up that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I have to agree about the world expanding into this information, and I think a lot of it subconsciously. And if you're like me, you probably watch a lot of TV and movies. I watch probably too much TV, but I watch. But like the shows I watch though are like Lost.
Well, it is your business. I mean, you are in the business to do these kind of work. So.
Yeah, but like the show Lost, Fringe. Actually, if you're familiar with, you're probably familiar with Tom Campbell's work if you read his books. If you watch the show Caprica on Sci-Fi,
I've heard of it. Yeah,
the script is based off of Tom's books, but obviously put into a fictional story. Mm-hmm. But the idea of having consciousness outside of a body into a artificial body is very interesting. I know the way they tell stories are written too, but when you have shows like Fringe that are talking about interdimensions, travel, some of it they've even gone into astral projection, dreams, and tapping into consciousness. I think it's very exciting, and these types of shows, especially in prime time on these major networks, mm-hmm. are subconsciously feeding this information to people. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
When you have movies that come out like Avatar, for example, I mean that movie would not have worked 15, 20 years ago when that script was written. I don't think.
Well, it's still not completely accepted by the mainstream Hollywood, world either. Because I know that there was an award, I can't tell you which one it was off the top of my head, but there was an award that was not given to the director of that movie, that was given to another movie that was more warlike and stuff like that. But really, he should have gotten for that movie. So it's still kind of, they touch on this. It's coming up in mainstream. Fringe is a great show. I like the intention behind all of it. I think it really grabs people, and they're successful because that is exactly what's happening in the world. It's slowly seeping into the movie world. Is a really hard place to break into because they want war, they want something in their films, the big screens. I have friends that are actors and producers and all of these things in Hollywood, and I know for a fact that they have a hard time breaking in with new genre like that because it doesn't sell the way that they really want it to sell. Or maybe it's being blocked for whatever reason, whatever you believe. It doesn't really matter. The point is that things are changing. And the fact that people bought so many copies, not copies, but they went to see that movie, the ticket sales, tell the story itself. People want that kind of information. I also think you touched on a really big topic. I wish we had more time to go into this, was the transference of consciousness into artificial bodies. And there's actually been some research in ancient times, old manuscripts, old pictographs on old temples and stuff that actually show what seems to be a process of, soul transference. And that may be one of the things behind the Egyptians and all the mummifications that took place, was tending to the soul science. And I know Whitley Strieber has written a couple really good books on this topic too. Are you familiar with his work by any chance? Whitley Strieber?
A little bit.
I would read some of his books. I think you would really like them. I think that there's one 2012 World War for Souls, or War of the Souls. That was one of my favorite books, and it was written in a fiction sense, but there's a lot of truth in that. And it brings out the topic of soul transference. Now, I really believe, and I only have 2 minutes, and I know that this is going to be a poor thing to bring up right now, but I really believe that the science of the soul is something that we have totally lost touch of. And it's a very, very, it's been very controlled. It's been very manipulated. It's been kept from us. A lot of conspiracy behind it. But over the years, the indigenous cultures have really kept touch with that stuff, and it's considered hidden knowledge. But coming out now are movies like this, things that kind of suggest these things, and we have a genetic memory that starts to waken up where we remember, that this is truth. So anyway, Mike, my listeners, I love you all, and I'm sorry to bring up this topic because I know I could do another hour on this show, and we could probably talk about this for a while. But Mike, in the last minute, how do people, do you work with people independently, or is it just you just reach people through your films?
No, well, the path is obviously that we submit the films, and people respond to us on either through email or we have a forum on our website where people post comments and reviews about the film. But my personal business, Habernig Productions, is that's HabernicProductions.com. I work with clients. We produce commercials and little web videos. It's more of a typical production company.
That's your business, and if people want more information about what you do, you welcome their contact then. Yeah. Okay. So, in ending, thepathseries.com. I've been speaking with Michael Habernig and April Hanna, who joined us for the first segment of the show, first half hour of the show. Good luck, guys. I'm really excited about this. This is going to be a really good thing, and I really honor and commend your work that you're doing out in the world. Thanks so much for joining me, Mike.